Oh, and I see I spelled your last name wrong. I'll fix it. And oh my gosh, I pushed it. Let's go live. And I was like, no. Oh, well, I'll go back. Never dull. It's never dull over here. I spelled your last name wrong. All right. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, good evening, just depending on where you are in the world. Do you realize right now, Louise, that for somebody, we're their like 2 a.m. infomercial?
I know. Especially the Antipodeans of the world. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Right. Somewhere in the world, someone's up just scrolling YouTube, and here we are, you and I together.
Yeah, I love that. I love being global.
Yeah. Welcome, everybody. And today I'm really excited. We've got Louise Eddington coming back. We've had a couple interviews we've done together, and you'll be back to teach and guide us through asteroids and things like that. And today, though, we're going to explore these moons, specifically the new and the full in December. And they've got fantastic alignment with Mars, as well as you've got the asteroid perspectives to share with us as well. And I cannot wait to hear what you have to say. So welcome back.
Yeah, it's lovely to be here, Stormy. Always love talking to you and being on your channel. So thank you.
Yeah. we have a my Mercury's in Gemini and your moon's in Gemini. So we have a really nice, kind of ease, I think, of information.
I think so. Yeah. We're good at just bouncing off each other. So yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Gemini.
In Gemini, right? I know we're having all of this retrograde activity. So we'll get into that in just a second. But everybody, welcome. Good morning. I see you in the chat over here in Melbourne. We've got some people in San Francisco as well. So good morning. Pleasure to be here with you. Even if you are watching back later, we just welcome you to this chat. This is the last month of the year. We're going to wrap up actually with the new moon in Capricorn, which I think is really profound, since we had such a big signature in Capricorn energy as we started 2022, that it's not, obviously it's the end of the year, it's Capricorn season, right? So that's not what's uncommon. It's the timing. This is a 1 degree moon that we're going to take on. So truly all of the things we've been walking through and learning, I think they're now at a stage of new understanding and application as we head into 2023. So should we, I get all excited about the new moon. Should we talk about what's going on at this full moon first?
Yeah, but we should really quickly, because the full moon, of course, is coming on the back of another 1 degree new moon, the Sagittarius new moon that's on November the 23rd, with Jupiter, the ruler of Sagittarius, stationing direct just 5 minutes after that new moon. And so, of course, it's my favorite time of the year because I have a Sagittarius stellium and Gemini moon. So I can't not talk about how we're leading into this full moon. But I think kind of one of the most important things about the Gemini full moon is that the moon is almost exactly conjunct Mars in Gemini by 6 solar arc minutes, and Mars is almost exactly at the midpoint of its rare retrograde in Gemini. It's Mars goes retrograde in Gemini and back into Cancer, and or it's the other way around, starts in Cancer and goes back into Gemini, or starts in Gemini and goes back into Taurus. But it's not since 1943 that Mars has been fully retrograde in Gemini, and this full moon is almost exactly at the midpoint of that retrograde. So we're kind of at a turning point. Not only are full moons kind of completions, but we're at a turning point of what this Mars retrograde is meaning for us. And so I think that's important on the full moon, but also the full moon is square to Juno, bringing in the asteroids. Juno in Pisces, and Juno is the partnership asteroid, often called the marriage asteroid, but I see her as more partnership of everything. She's kind of the Hieros Gamos asteroid who brings all opposites together. And that's really interesting because Gemini is the sign of the twins as well, of community and bringing everything together. So it kind of feels like this full moon could have the potential to release things that are separating us and start bringing people back together again. So
that is a really, you know, whether we're just looking at the events that have been happening in the world and we got to experience our very own, like we made history books in this last few years. Right?
Oh yeah.
So we've got that, but you know, the place that I always love to bring people back to is come into your own home, right? Because if you're navigating the world in your home, like you got to look here, but then also come into our first home, into our bodies. So looking at these concepts of Juno and this moon, bringing those things back together. I love how you pointed that out, because, you know, where are we finding these unifications within our own personal spaces that we then get to also watch as they come together back in the world, which is really.
Yeah. And Gemini is more kind of about local community, really, anyway. So I am speaking more about, I think we're going to start within our homes and then in our local communities, and then it's going to kind of spread out. But then I'm a very idealistic person. So
I think, you know what I mean? I feel like we vibrate in that very idealistic, hopeful kind of for humanity, which is absolutely fantastic. We need that. Right. There has to be some hope and some optimism. You know, the other thing during this Mars retrograde that I keep pointing people to is that, first of all, you know, be thinking about, first of all, who's in your network, right? Like, who are you interacting with and receiving, taking the action, Mars, of receiving information from, and what's the information that you're sharing, you know, that intake, outtake, the dissemination. And I think that's a big deal. So I think we'll see even in our strategies that people will take on different information sources because it's like a bringing together. You know, I realize that in my separation, this is the information keeping me separated instead of creating a unity. You know, so what a neat full moon to even say, oh, I need to end that, just acknowledge what it brings into my life and make the adjustments that are needed.
Definitely. And even how we speak to each other, you know, Mars in Gemini has a reputation for being rather assertive, shall we say, with its words, but it's a retrograde. So we're revisiting, you know, how we speak to each other and how we communicate with each other. So, you know, perhaps taking a more gentle pause before we kind of lash out at people and start to just think of the other and listen more as well with a Mars retrograde in Gemini. So.
Yeah. And I mean, can you give examples of, you know, are you seeing this? Where are you seeing this show up for you, if at all, where you're really seeing us rethink our wording or how we're engaging?
Well, I've seen it, you know, with people on social media, particularly, like people are withdrawing. There's less kind of, not everywhere, but people that are kind of a bit aware are being more cautious about kind of diving into big social media fights and so on and so forth. People are exhausted by it. And I think this Mars retrograde is just saying, you don't need to do that. It's not achieving anything. It's just hurting each other. So I think people are pulling themselves in a little bit more. It doesn't mean they're not speaking up for themselves or speaking their truth. It's just how they do it more. It's different, I think, is a big thing. And people are making new alliances as well. People are kind of thinking, you know, we don't need to kind of fight all the time. We can kind of just talk to each other. So, yeah.
Right. Yeah. I love that. The reading of the strategy, right? It's like, we've got to get some things done, right? Because communication has to be delivered and received, or we're not going to get anything done.
Exactly. And I did a video for this Mars retrograde, and so it's very relevant to this, really, with Mandy Raytrott of Ecstatic Astrology, and we look back, and it was kind of at the turning point of World War II that Mars was retrograde in Gemini last time, and it was a turning point. It didn't stop the fighting, but it created new alliances. And so, you know, if you take what's happening way out there and bring it right into you, everything that happens out there is reflected in us. And so, we are making new alliances, more people coming together at all levels of life, not just politically. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely brilliant. Okay, what else can we pack into this full moon? I feel like we've said so many things, like so many culminations, so many turning points, so many changes are available for us under particular full moon. And let me ask you this. One of the things that is a kind of a big piece of my practice is with the new and the full moons, those first 8 hours after them, how potent that energy is. We do have the full cycle, but what's your take on that? Because I do find that first 8 hours is really, there's a lot.
Oh, I agree. I think it is. And it's kind of setting the scene for what's coming up as well, I think, in that period. And on this full moon, the Mercury, it's a Mercury ruled full moon because Mercury rules Gemini, and Mercury is actually at 1 degree Capricorn, so it's already kind of bringing in the energy of the new moon that we're going to talk about next. It's 1 degree Capricorn. And also Mercury and Venus are officially out of the beams of the sun by this point. So the eclipse period that we've been under, which was an intense period with all the personal planets or the two most personal planets, Mercury and Venus, hidden behind the sun. We've kind of been in this big melting pot of compost, I've been calling it. We've been having an extreme upgrade, I think, or been asked to upgrade. And now it's kind of time to move forward. So that's another thing I noticed with the full moon, for sure, that Mercury was already bringing in the next new moon. So
yeah, and so can we take a minute? I would love for you, just in case we have somebody who's a little bit newer, what does it mean that they're under the beams of the sun? What are symptomatic things that people can kind of spot as we're looking at that movement?
Yeah, well, both Mercury and Venus, their cycle means that they are behind the sun from our perspective at certain points in their cycle. And then they're called combust. I mean, other planets do it too, but these are the ones we're going to be looking at. And when they're behind the sun, it's kind of like their energy is a little bit cut off from us, and we are in our own underworld journey as well. And Mercury being the mind and Venus being relationships and love, we're kind of in this deep dive into our relationship and communication energy when they're under the beams. Their energy's burned out. We're not feeling it as immediately. So we're having to dig deep to look within and emerge from that. Does that explain it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's a beautiful picture. And thinking back, even at this moon with those two right there, to the signature that Venus was working on in Capricorn at the beginning of the year, we've been infiltrated with this idea of what do I value, right? Like really what's valuable to me, what's valuable to my society, there's these big value questions that I think has left us this big fat stamp to work on in half of us. I mean, households really. It was huge, right? Like this was huge. And so now, like you're saying, kind of coming to this culmination of it is time to move forward. You do know, you are informed, you've seen it, you kind of know, you've had to dive deep and go with that. Now let's move forward. And I just feel like that's gorgeous, leading, like you said, into this new moon at this 1 degree where I almost have this sense of duty, like, now, walk forward.
Yeah, you know what you have to do, you know what you have to commit to, and what you have to be diligent with. And a lot of it's about conserving what we have that is good. There's been a tendency over the last few years, and we've been in very challenging times, as we all know, to say we want to kind of burn it all down and so on and so forth. But no, it's kind of, we're being deepened. We're being like, take a look at what's worth conserving in your own life. This is, and what you need to release and let go of, and what are your real core values.
Yeah, the real core values. That's exactly what I was just thinking, which is interesting. So let's lead into, because that was perfect for our new moon. I mean, 1 whole degree of Capricorn, if that is not the signature of Yeah, don't worry, you're just getting started.
I know. The early degrees of a sign are really the kind of fresh start. And, I always look at the numerology a little bit as well. And 1 is the first number, it is new beginnings, it is kind of pioneering and starting. And Capricorn is an initiating sign as well. It's a cardinal sign which initiates new beginnings. So, yeah.
Yeah, so it's that very reverent nod back to Venus being like, got it.
Yes.
Okay, here we go.
Exactly. Yeah.
So with this new moon, we have an opportunity to plant our seeds of intention to begin something new. And again, you've got this first 8 hours. It's very potent to just be aware whether or not you're actually planting something, which some people plant and do ceremonies and things like that.
Yeah.
That's fine. But carrying in the new vision, your new ambition, Capricorn, but long term. That's the thing I do like about working with Capricorn or Saturnian energy, is that it's not actually very interested in a short-term solution. It's like, no, we're going to rise to the level of sustainability long-term here.
Yeah, this is definitely the long game. Yeah.
And
I'm very, very hopeful about this new moon, to be honest. Because it's in a T-square, which means it's kind of in a square to 2 planets that are opposing each other, and to Ceres in Libra and to Jupiter in Aries. Jupiter will have moved back into Aries after its retrograde, and Ceres over there in Libra is they're both really activating the world points. They're all activating the world points, which is the 0 degrees of the cardinal signs. So it just has such a hope of we're going to turn things around. Ceres in Libra. Ceres is about nurturing and nourishment, and also grief and forgiveness. And in Libra, this is bringing in a more Venus energy again, of bringing in balance and harmony back again. We want to nurture peace and balance and harmony. And that's what Ceres in Libra is saying to me on this new moon. And opposing Jupiter in Aries is taking massive action. I also associate Ceres with climate change. Take too long to say why, but she shows up in many climate change issues, let's just say, all the time and again, because I've done a lot of work with Ceres. And so I'm very hopeful that on this new moon, there's kind of going to be some new push towards living in better harmony with the earth and with the climate. So
yeah, and you'll actually, I think you're moving towards having a series on series.
I am going to be doing a series on Ceres. And in fact, series on all the asteroids eventually, but I'm going to start with Ceres because she's conjunct my ascendant, and in fact my Ceres is conjunct this new moon. So
oh, that's absolutely brilliant. So we'll make sure that we have a link to Louise's YouTube channel and that series so you guys can take it on, and of course you'll be back to teach about asteroids as well. But I want to ask you, you were talking about in the beginning, tying this particular new moon back to the Sagittarius moon. And I want to explore that just a little bit, because I always like to pattern back and give people a place to think about, what were you doing? What was going on? What was happening in your life at that time? And considering it in a fuller cycle. So why the step back to that moon?
Because the Sagittarius new moon was at 1 degree as well. They're both at 1 degree. This tends to happen. We kind of start a new cycle and we'll have a series of lunations at either the same or very similar degree. But also on this new moon, on the Sagittarius new moon, we still had Venus and Mercury hidden behind the sun, and now they've emerged out of that darkness. And Mercury and Mercury and Venus are our most personal planets. They are the closest to the sun. We are the third rock from the sun, and Mercury and Venus kind of bring the sun's light through to us because they're closer to the sun. And here they are, they've kind of emerged renewed after their underworld journey. And so I think it has to tie back to it. We can't we can't have, nothing happens in isolation. On
Yeah.
the yeah. So the Sagittarius new moon kind of set the arrows flying into the future. And we looked at the vision. What are we visioning out of all of this? And now on the Capricorn new moon, it's time to start for the long game, as you said. So
Yeah. And I love that. So if we look back too, because we can step just a little bit further. So what was that in June with the full moon in Sagittarius? So, the questions that I have for people when we track back is to go back and say, well, what were you ending? What was coming to culmination? What was no longer a part of your truth basis anymore? What were you discovering? Right? In right there in June at 13 degrees, what was happening for you? And then track it forward. Because it's really, I think, interesting to use astrology and say, this is where we're going, this is where we're going, this is where we're going, but there's no real relation point unless you can look back in your life and see where you've come from. Also, I think it helps people remember that nothing happens in isolation, right? I try to teach, we're just living our patterns, and you are your best predictive tool of what's happened and what will happen, but you have to know where to look to kind of dig up your gems. You know what I mean?
Oh, exactly. And astrology is all cycles, of course. So yes, we look back 6 months ago for the back to June, as Stormy said. We can even look back a year ago to the last new moon and full moons in December to see what was happening then, and just to get a flavor of what was happening. History doesn't repeat really, but it does rhyme. So what was beginning then, or what was ending then? What were you releasing? How have you shifted and changed? Particularly with the Sagittarius full moon, that's a mutable sign. So how were you changing then? And now it's kind of like, as you said, with the cardinal Capricorn new moon, on the Capricorn full moon, what were you giving up? What were you ending? Capricorn is kind of limits and endings too. So, and now what are you starting to build after you let go of something back in June? So.
Yeah. And so as you think about this through your personal experience, what did that kind of look like? What have been some big shifts and changes for you that this moons are? I mean, you're just like, oh, everything. Like
well,
all of it.
Going back to the values thing, really, it's big shifts for me have come because I have Capricorn in my first house with if you're looking at certain house systems, but anyway, with the new moon happening on Capricorn, I can feel that I've been moving more and more towards really being in alignment with the cycles of nature, and less wanting less to build massive kind of wealth and just for the sake of it and things like that, which was a tendency a few years ago. There's been a lot of harking back in cycles in my research to the late 80s. We've had a lot of things coming to roost, and I've talked about it on my social media, about when greed was good and trickle down economics was going to save the world and things like that, and people got richer and richer and richer. There's a definite kind of ending and a move away from that. So that's going to be good. But it's happened in my own life too. At one point I thought it would be great to have this huge mansion maybe somewhere and things like that. Now I just think, oh, no, thank you. All those rooms.
Right. Who is going to clean those baseboards? That's what Virgo rising. I'm like, who's going to be doing the baseboards?
Yeah, it just wants, we're moving towards a more sustainable lifestyle generally. And these new and full moons are really part of that as well. So think about really, particularly on the Capricorn new moon, what do you really want to build that is more sustainable?
Yeah, that's exciting. I always think it's interesting to hear how people are experiencing this personally. All this Capricorn energy is in my 5th house, but also my South node is there. And as you know, I kind of went full speed, even though I fought with the universe for 6 months at building Legatia Academy to help people make their businesses sustainable, especially as we're here in the digital revolution time. And so that's been a absolutely like, it was nothing like starting Stormy Grace, which I just did in tears. And I was like, thank you. Universe wants me to be an astrologer. This is much more solid.
Yeah.
You know,
in my work too. Yeah, I've been working towards building things that are more sustainable. Yeah, rather than, relying on, just people flying in and booking readings. It's building a long-term kind of sustainable business. Yeah.
Which isn't that so funny? Because it's like, I feel like for me personally, at the beginning of the year with that Venus being there and really working over there, I don't know how many times people have asked me about business. And I was like, yeah, but listen, I just do astrology, and so now to have that South Node really called out and to say, oh, I do know how to do this. And I can show other people how to not be afraid to live and love life and have profitable space, and that they are spiritually and materially intertwinable without the greed, without, it's a really interesting thing. And I'll share this too. But yesterday, my daughter, my fifth house, my daughter in college called and she said, Mom, I think next year I'm ready for an apartment. And I thought, oh, how funny. Right.
Yeah.
She is. She is going there.
Oh. Yeah. Good luck. I've been through that recently, so I've had all that as well of as we build up to these about being the empty nester and
yeah well, it's so exciting. So I don't know anybody else out there experiencing that with their kids, or even it's interesting, some of my clients have younger children, but they're kind of just right at that point and they're watching this advancement. They're watching them take their first fill in the blank, so it's very neat.
Or they're starting school or something like that. Yeah,
absolutely. So, man, well, thank you so much for sitting in and talking about
these. I mentioned one quick thing.
Oh my God, yeah.
The Capricorn new moon is also conjunct Asteroid Hygeia. I would be very remiss if I didn't mention that. And Hygeia is really about holistic health of all kinds. And so she is at the same degree as the new moon in Capricorn. So in Capricorn, I would say look at the structures of your life holistically. With Hygeia there, this not so much about necessarily the physical health, but also physical health, your structures of your bones and things like that as well, which is very Capricorn. And take a good look at that and look at where are you wanting to build some strength in your life with Capricorn.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love that. Thank you. And so can I just ask really quick now see, look, a rabbit hole has been opened. So when we're looking at Hygeia in our own charts, what are we looking for there?
So where Hygeia is in your chart really is the area of life that you are called to be more holistic in. So for example, if you have Hygeia in Scorpio, you're probably more focused on kind of reproductive health and your lower kind of chakras and body as well, of the health there. And Capricorn, which Hygeia is on this one, it's probably a good time to take up weight training too. We all know that we all know that lifting weights strengthens your bones, which helps your whole bodily structure stay upright for the rest of your life as you age. So even if all you do is kind of just get some little dumbbells at home and start doing a little bit of weights, it's probably a really good time to do that. So
yeah, brilliant. Well, so everybody go check out. Now I have to know where mine's at. I'm like, okay, what am I supposed to do? This is the thing. I love bringing people over because then I get even more curious and I'm like, oh, I should know about that. Brilliant. Yeah. All right, you guys, we are going to wrap up, but thank you so much for being here with us. Make sure you have checked out your December horoscopes on my channel and go check out everything that Louise has to offer. I will make sure to put a link down there. And Louise, you have written fantastic books that are like kicking butt and taking names on bestseller lists. So lots, you're doing a lot. out here. And I just really appreciate you.
Yeah, too much sometimes.
Well, you have a Gemini moon, like doing it's really what you're doing, and that's totally okay.
Exactly. Thanks for having me, Stormy. It's always good to chat with you anyway. So.
Yes. All right, you guys, I love you, and we look forward to seeing